Wildfire is a game that I don't think has been given its flowers. It's an indie game developed by Sneaky Bastards that released in May of 2020, and it has received very little fanfare despite being quite good at almost everything it does. It's a 2D stealth platformer that combines the elemental bending of Avatar the Last Airbender with the strategic sneaking of Dishonored. I'd also say the modern Hitman games appear to be an inspiration as well, specifically for how replaying missions is a core part of the game's appeal, utilizing layout knowledge, unlockables, and challenges to alter how earlier missions are approached. It's a recipe for success, and it mostly delivers. The game has only one real flaw in my opinion, which I'll get into, but I want to first go over what makes the game so special. Wildfire succeeds with what I consider the three must-haves for a stealth game: variety in its encounter design, customization, and finally, replayability. It's a game that you could likely run through in around 6 or 7 hours if you played through each level just once. If you like stealth games, it would be a highly enjoyable 6 or 7 hours, but you'd only see one part of what makes this a good game: its encounter design. The game's levels continue to grow more complex as you progress. New enemies, new environmental factors, new mission objectives. You'll unlock each of the controllable elements as you work through the missions, but you'll only get to explore a bit of the customization. What you are able to do with each element starts simple, but as you unlock further abilities, your options during missions grow. For example, the first element you unlock is fire, and early on, you're limited to just being able to throw a fireball at flammable objects. As you progress though, you can unlock the ability to morph your fire into a smoke bomb, which can temporarily stun enemies, or to use your fire to explosively propel yourself upwards. Each of the elemental abilities needs to be unlocked, and many can be further upgraded several times to increase their effectiveness. While you'll be able to dip your toes into the upgrade systems in a single playthrough, it won't be possible to fully upgrade all of your abilities. Wildfire actively incentivizes replaying levels and even the entire game through two expertly thought out design decisions. First are the challenges, optional objectives, and collectibles for each individual level. Let's briefly go through all three of these. The challenges are the same across all of the levels, so beating a speedrun target time, causing no enemy deaths, remaining undetected, not reloading a save during a level, and rescuing all of the villagers present. The optional objectives range from tasks like reading all the notes on a level to using only a specific element to burning 90% of the vegetation on a map. These are all unique and often rely on the level's gimmick. Finally, the collectibles take the form of meteor shards scattered throughout levels that can be later equipped in order to grant specific gameplay bonuses. For example, holding a smoke bomb to make yourself less visible to guards, or being able to sprint across water surfaces. Each of these makes replaying individual levels enjoyable, but on top of this, Wildfire features a new Game Plus mode that carries forward all of your current upgrades into a fresh playthrough. This is the second great design decision. Earlier levels now feel new as you work through them with the elemental powers you lacked the first time through. Many of the early challenges which felt daunting at the beginning of the game become laughably easy with the late game's expanded toolkit, and this is what I mean by Wildfire nailing the replayability. It does a great job of using each of these three core aspects of the stealth genre: level design, customization, and replayability, to feed into and strengthen the others. Now, let's discuss some of the other areas of the game, such as its story, which adds to the overall experience but not for the actual narrative it presents. This story is about a person from a small village who gains the ability to use magic from a crashed meteor. Because of this, their village is destroyed and their friends enslaved by an empire that fears sorcery and witches. It's simple and should be seen as merely providing the explanation for the gameplay rather than an attempt to tell a compelling story. In regards to providing those explanations for gameplay, it is incredibly successful and supports the excellent level design by using the narrative to mix up the goals in levels. This could be escaping, rescuing X number of villagers, retrieving a key, destroying something, just to list a few. The game does try to do more with the world building, with the optional dialogue between guards or findable notes during missions, but it's forgettable and not necessary. Now, there are a few more things I really like about the game, but I think it's about time to talk about what its one flaw is. To do so, I'm going to need to give an example, but doing so requires me to name the other controllable elements in the game. This isn't something I believe is a spoiler, given that the Steam page description for the game says up front which elements you'll gain control over, but I want to respect that some people might disagree with that and want to go into the game as blind as possible. So this is your warning. The 3 elements you gain control over are water, earth, fire. Long ago, at the beginning of the game, these elements existed in imaginary harmony. Then, everything changed when the player unlocked more abilities. Each element, though visually distinct, shared a striking similarity to the last. Only the player, master of all 3 elements, could discover these barely perceivable differences. When the game needed it most, the power's uniqueness vanished. 100 hours passed, and the player discovered the core mechanics behind the elements, and although their visual effects were great, they all felt strangely familiar. But the player believes a sequel could save the game. Okay, for the 5 of you that didn't close out of the video after hearing that, I apologize. In case it wasn't clear, where Wildfire stumbles slightly is in the sameness of many of its abilities. Each element's set of powers features several abilities that function identical to ones found in the other elements. Instead of each element feeling unique and expanding what is possible with the moveset, many feel like reskins of the same core actions. Visualize a bunch of buckets. One is an ability that stuns an enemy. One is an ability to move upwards. One is a passive ability that adjusts some numbers for your character during missions. Each of the elements, fire, water, and earth, have an ability that goes into each of these buckets. For stunning an enemy, fire can be turned into a smoke bomb, water can freeze enemies in ice, and earth ensnares them with vines. For moving upwards, fire has the jet propulsion, water allows you to ride a bubble, and earth creates climbable vines. For the passive abilities, fire slows how quickly you catch on fire yourself, water how quickly you swim as well as how much oxygen you have underwater, and for earth how quickly you can crawl in grass or climb vines. Different elements, but same bucket. This is a shame because when the developers do get creative with the abilities, they're quite interesting. The final ability in the Earth skill tree allows players to plant a flower at their feet that they can teleport back to at any time from anywhere on the map. Not only was this unique, but I found this highly useful to use when rescuing villagers. The final abilities for both fire and water, while unique, felt too context-specific to be widely useful. The fire ability allows you to ride the steam from heat sources, but I found that there weren't enough spots for this in the levels as they were, and it was too unsustainable to be constantly making your own heat sources. For water, the final ability allows you to revive a character. While useful for both enemies and villagers, this felt designed as an ability for the cooperative mode, which I never engaged with. Having said all of this, I also understand why several of the abilities are reskins. Some of the levels restrict what elements players have access to, meaning that there needs to be an equivalent ability in each element. This makes mechanical sense, but has the consequence of making unlocking new abilities not very exciting once you realize it. And as a game that's somewhat pitching itself as an Avatar power fantasy, this is a problem. Now, I believe you should have all of the crucial information you need in order to make an informed decision about this game. I can't tell you if you should buy it or not, just my thoughts and experiences with it. I'm like a previous Avatar in that way, full of wisdom, but also a bit annoying. With the final 5 minutes or so of this video, I'm going to highlight more specific and unique parts of Wildfire that I enjoyed, but these are also more spoilery. If you're still unsure if Wildfire is for you, I would perhaps stick around for the first 1 or 2 items on this list, as perhaps they'll tip the needle for you. The most interesting thing Wildfire does, in my opinion, is its bobcat enemy type. Introduced in the 3rd mountainous region of the game, these creatures operate off both sightlines and scent radiuses, meaning even hidden behind vegetation or on a completely different floor as them, if you were within the bobcat's smelling radius, they would become alerted. This could be countered, however, by picking up and carrying a sleeping or unconscious cat in order to mask your scent. They were a challenging and unique addition. In particular, a level called Felidae Crevice, which by my count features 20 bobcats, was a standout mission in the game due to forcing creativity in how you maneuvered through the stage. For another standout mission, the final level in the Caves region, titled Sulfur Mines, tasks players with detonating explosives at the beginning of the stage in order to flood the mines. Fire is needed to do this, but it can only be found at the very end of the stage in an area inhabited by a demonic fire creature. This creates an optional objective of luring the demon to the explosives instead of lighting them yourself. It was a creative puzzle that wasn't required, but elevated the level above many of the others. Next, I liked how after unlocking the fire, water, and earth elements, most curious players will naturally wonder, what about air? And this is then paid off in the final mission. It's revealed that the Archduchess of this witch-hunting society actually controls air herself. It unfortunately leads to the game's one and only boss encounter that features a massive, unforgiving difficulty spike, but it was cool nonetheless to see the final element in action, even if it was being used against you. It would have been cool if air was then unlocked during New Game Plus as a bonus, but given that its abilities center on flying and shooting lightning bolts, I'm not sure how it could have been balanced with the core game. Finally, the game made 2 small gameplay decisions that I think benefit it greatly. First is that each stage features a shrine that players could locate and then offer an elemental source to in order to receive an upgrade point. Which upgrade point they received was tied directly to what element they offered, so if you offer fire, you get a fire upgrade point. Each shrine could only be activated once per playthrough, meaning you had to be thoughtful about what element to offer because upgrade points were limited in a run. These shrines would then be reset on a New Game Plus, which meant abilities could eventually be maxed out across multiple playthroughs. This was the best of both worlds, thoughtful on the first playthrough and power fantasy on the second. Finally, I liked that the game didn't give you any weapons, no bow and arrow, no stealth takedowns, and no direct means of attacking your enemies. Furthermore, head-on confrontations isn't viable because in most situations you can't get past alerted guards, they knock you backwards and can quickly kill you. This means you're weak both in terms of what you can do to enemies as well as what you can take from enemies. Players are forced into being creative and engaging with the environmental systems built for the game, which is exactly what I look for in immersive sims. I could probably keep going about several of the other missions I enjoyed, or funny moments, particularly deaths, that occurred during my playthroughs, but I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this smaller video. Work is progressing on the Dishonored Death of the Outsider video, and I would expect it sometime in the next several months. Last thing I want to say is that if you are an early subscriber to my channel, then you might remember that I've actually already done a short video on Wildfire. It was in fact my first video ever. And because it was my first video ever, it had awful scripting, audio, and video editing. It was an awful review for an awesome game. That being said, it was an important part of my YouTube journey. Everything I said in that initial video was and is still true, but I don't think that it did the game justice. If you're interested in seeing that original video, it is unlisted from my channel, but a link to the video can be found in the description of this video. I apologize in advance if you choose to watch it. And that's it. Take care.